Evening, and thank you for joining today's Healthy Heart Nation Heart to Heart discussion. I am Danette Batiste, the CEO and Executive Director for Healthy Heart Nation, where we are working toward eliminating disparities in our community in the areas of health, education, justice, and business. And our organization looks at those four areas as the legs of the table, and the table is set to hold up our community. And so we are looking to join together to not only identify problems, but to provide some solutions using that thought leaders in those areas in order to produce them. And so today, our health arm is going to be talking about the Daniel Fast, a bridge to healthy living. And January is Daniel Fast and New Year's Resolution Month. And what a perfect time for us to combine the two of these things. Tonight, we will discuss how we can use the Daniel Fast to jumpstart a long-term healthy lifestyle. We will explore how faith can be a powerful tool to help us stay consistent with our health goals. We will also dig into how inviting God into our health journey can transform the way we look at our health and help us navigate the challenges that come with living a healthy lifestyle long term. Additionally, we will talk about making healthy eating a spiritual practice, mindful eating, the importance of connecting your health to your purpose, and how faith can help us develop a deeper why to getting healthy. So let's get started. I am joined tonight by my special guest, Cersei Blue, co-founder with Gigi Carter of Healthy for My Purpose Academy. Cersei is also the author of Eat Better Now, Not Less Recipes. Cersei has a bachelor's degree in communications and a master's of divinity in counseling. Completed and also has completed the health coach program from Well Coaches at the University of North Florida. Cersei is a spiritual health coach and overcomer of personal tragedy after a challenging second pregnancy. Cersei, welcome to the show today. And we're so glad to see you.
Hi, thank you so much, Danette, for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. And so we kind of just touched on a little bit about the personal challenge after your challenging second pregnancy. Can you tell us a little bit more about that experience and how that brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, I know we're talking about the Daniel fast today, so I happened to stumble on it. My story starts back in 2010 in the last trimester of my pregnancy, and I was actually diagnosed with high blood pressure. And at the time, I didn't know that women who were diagnosed with high blood pressure during pregnancy were at a higher risk for complications before, during, or after delivery. And that was even higher for African American women. And so I end up having a complication during my delivery, and my son lost oxygen to his brain, and he had to be life lifted out to the hospital, and he never fully recovered because he lost a lot of his capabilities because of the loss of oxygen, and so we had to have 24-hour care for him. And as you could imagine, as a family, it was very traumatic. just the whole experience and all of that. And so a little bit after his first birthday, maybe a couple of weeks, he ended up
Mhm.
passing away.
Oh my gosh,
And
I'm so sorry.
yeah, thank you. And as you could imagine, that was so devastating because I think as a parent, you just automatically assume or you take for granted that you're going to outlive your children. And so that was
Yes,
probably the darkest point in my life, my family's life. I mean, I had a lot of support and everything, but it was a
yeah,
very dark time. And I think my health had already been kind of, unstable. I had the high blood pressure during the pregnancy, but I think during that period, it even took a more of a toll because here you're dealing with the death, you're
absolutely.
dealing with the trauma, the depression, the stress of even taking care of a special needs child for a year, like 24 hours. And
Right,
so everything put
right.
to a head. I think at that point, I probably had
Mhm.
gained the most weight I've ever gained. I know that I definitely was using food as one of my coping mechanisms, just to
Okay.
kind of through. And so just out of the
Yeah.
blue, a friend of mine called me and she says, "Hey, I'm doing the Daniel fast. Do you want to jump in on this?"
Mhm.
And I've done
Right.
the Daniel fast in the past with my church, but
Mhm.
I never did it to the fullness. I would add a little bit of this and add a little bit of that. And so I had never really done a pure Daniel fast exactly the way it's designed. And I remember telling her, I said, "I'll do the Daniel fast with you, but I'm going to add eggs and I'm going to add cheese." And I just ranted off all this stuff that I'm going
You're
to
just gonna do your
to
own
be
thing,
honest,
right?
I was just gonna do my own thing because there was a part of me that I was
Yeah,
attached to those foods. And I was like, well, I'm
right,
dealing with my own stuff. I didn't want to let them go. And so I said, I'm gonna add this, I'm gonna add that.
right.
And she arrested me in the moment. She said, listen, if you're
Mm.
gonna do this Daniel fast, you're gonna have to do it exactly the way it's designed. Take it or leave it. And for some
It
reason that
sounds like
just
a good
arrested me in
friend.
the moment. Yeah, she's actually my best friend. God uses people in so many ways. And so it just arrested
Right.
me in the moment. And I said, you know what? Okay,
Mhm.
I'm gonna do this. It's almost like it was just meant for her
Okay.
to really arrest me. And I went
Yes. So
full
I'm gonna
steam
have you
ahead.
pause right here.
Okay.
I'm gonna have you pause right here because you've talked about a lot, and I
Hmm.
definitely want to go back before we
Okay.
move into the healing and
Okay.
move into what has helped you through. Like
Hmm.
you talked about this traumatic situation,
Yeah.
and just coming to the realization that Black women experience a lot of morbidities in terms of like
Yeah.
we die more in childbirth, right? So
That's
that
right. Mhm.
experience was one where you survived, but it had
Right.
implications on your son. And so
Right.
I mean, just you talked about that year, you talked about that experience, and so I can hear that that you've been able to process this, right?
Hmm.
But there are so many other women that may be
Yeah.
experiencing something very similar to what you're experiencing right now. So
Yeah.
are you able to kind of just a little bit talk about like even in that year, how did you
Yeah.
get through the year? And then you said your second child, so you obviously had
Yeah.
another
Right.
child as well. So do you
Yeah.
mind sharing a
Yeah,
little
I
bit more
would. Yeah,
about
I
that?
think you know what it is? You go into and like I said, in retrospect, I knew that
Mhm.
high blood pressure put me at a higher
Mhm.
risk for complications. But at the time, because my mother had high blood pressure, my grandmother had high blood
Okay.
pressure, there's so many people in the family,
Mhm.
I didn't fully understand the danger. And I think a lot of
Okay.
times as women, even just in general,
Mhm.
we don't really understand the implications of what that can lead to.
Yes.
And I
Right.
just remember everything happening so fast that it's like you went
Okay.
from being diagnosed to high blood pressure to going into a complication to your son being in this whirlwind of medical issues because I remember he had to stay in the
Mhm.
hospital for about maybe 2 months before we could actually take him
Okay.
home. And then once we
Right.
did take him home, it was still a 24-hour process because of the
Yes.
fact that he wasn't able to drink on his own, so he had a feeding tube and some other things. But part of
Mhm.
that trauma there is that I had to deal with the loss. Right? Because
Right.
even though he was still there,
Mhm.
you're gonna let me tear up
Right.
Danette, but even
I'm
though he was
sorry.
still
I'm so
there,
sorry.
no, it's okay.
Yeah.
Even though he was still there was
Mhm.
this trauma of the expectation. And I think a lot of
Yes.
times with
Right.
a woman in delivery, and I know you're talking about women of color,
Mhm.
we all
Yes.
expect a good delivery. We all expect, or even the
Right.
spouse of those who lose their wives in the delivery, you expect the
Yeah.
outcome to work
Yes.
in the right way. And
Right.
so
Right.
a lot of that had to come to grips with the loss, come to grips with understanding um, how you got looped into something that you might have read in an article that now is you are now a part of the
It's
statistic.
real.
So it's
It's
real.
part of your
And
right.
so you
Yes.
had to process all of those things. Of course, you have your faith, you have your family, you have counseling to process the trauma, but
Right.
it takes a lot of self-reflection and a lot of, you know, really just processing everything. Yeah. Yeah.
And it
I'm
was
just
something like
reliving it.
even for
Yeah.
me.
So,
Yeah, I mean, but
yeah.
we like I think a lot of us take it for
Yeah.
granted,
Granted.
that you like
Yeah.
you said that you'll go into delivery and you'll come
Yeah.
out and you'll have the baby,
Right.
and so and that there are health situations that are like prevalent in a lot of our lives that we can
Yes.
try to address, as
Right.
much as possible. So did the pregnancy, did it make your blood pressure worse, or
Yes.
was
It
it
was,
just something that you were always aware of?
I think the blood pressure triggered it. So that's why I said I was
Okay,
diagnosed
okay,
with official high blood pressure
okay,
during the last trimester. But then after the
okay.
pregnancy, the blood pressure still remained,
Stayed elevated.
stayed elevated.
Okay, stayed
And
elevated.
so,
Okay,
yeah. So then
and
it
it was
started a pattern
okay.
to go from there. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and it was, it was take this medicine or those types of things, not necessarily looking at diet as a possible
Yeah.
aid to
No.
lowering it. Okay.
Yeah, at the time, I had a doctor, and I think she wanted to put me on
Hmm.
medication, but I remember at the time saying
Okay.
I didn't know what I was gonna do, but I just said, "Give me some time." I didn't
Sure.
know if I didn't even have
Sure.
a plan, to be honest. I went home, and
Right.
I didn't really actively put anything, but this was the other thing, is that sometimes we're anti-medication, because I think I was
Yes.
anti-medication, but at the same time, I didn't have a
Okay.
plan. And so
Correct. So you didn't
those
have an alternative. You didn't have an
I didn't have
alternative.
an alternative at the time, but I
Right.
felt in myself I had to try to figure something out, but I didn't have a plan.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, and Healthy Heart Nation does a lot of work around
Mhm.
pressure. We actually have a pressure project where we
Yes.
go into churches and barbershops and beauty shops just to bring that awareness. And
Right.
so, we do see elevated blood pressure. Some of them are very alarming. And like you said, a lot of people
Yeah.
are anti-medications. And so, what we try to talk to them about is, and I'm not a doctor, I play one on TV, but
Yeah. Yeah.
we do try to talk to them about sometimes you may need both. And maybe
Yeah.
you start with the medications and then you're working on your
Right.
diet and then you come off of the medications gradually. So,
Right. Yeah.
and like you said, food is so easy to just grab a hold of, especially when you're emotional and when you're
Right.
experiencing, it brings you that temporary comfort. And
It does.
so, okay. All
Yeah,
right.
and
So now,
I was actually on medication during the last trimester of the
yeah.
pregnancy, though, so they did put me on medication then.
Okay.
But when I got off,
Okay.
because it
Okay.
was induced by the pregnancy, they didn't keep it going. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. And so she told you about the Daniel fast, and she said, if you're
Yeah,
going
so
to
she
do it,
told me.
you need to do it right. Don't half do it, do it right.
Yeah, she said,
And
"Don't
that's
half
where
step with
that's
it."
where you picked up.
And
Okay.
I just yeah, and I just decided to dive in, and so I just literally did the Daniel fast 100%, and for those of you who are not familiar, the Daniel fast
Mhm.
basically is a whole food plant-based diet, but you don't have any artificial sugars, no processed food,
Okay.
um, nothing that's basically processed or anything like that, so it's the most whole form, um,
Okay.
of a whole food plant-based diet, so that's what it is, and so I
Okay.
dived into
Okay.
that, and I did that for about 30 days, and I can't tell
Mm.
you if it was 15 or 21, but it was almost like there was a complete shift. So I
Okay.
lost weight. My blood
Mhm.
pressure was regulated. I had
Mm.
mental and spiritual clarity. My mood was
Okay.
elevated. Um,
Okay.
there was just so many things that just changed within that short window. And I said to
Yes.
myself, "How could this be?" I just personally thought, well, when you do the Daniel fast, you're usually combining it with scriptures and prayer. So
Right.
it's a
And
spiritual
prayer. Right.
practice as well as the
Yes.
food. And so I thought, well, maybe God just did a miracle and that's that. And so I started to do some research. And of course, I
Mhm.
found, the work of many doctors like your husband and others, that a whole
Mhm.
food
Mhm.
plant-based diet was the only diet that was able to reverse heart disease and manage high blood pressure and
Right.
diabetes, and
Mhm.
prevent certain cancers, and the list went on. And I was like, wait a minute, where was this information all my life? So perhaps I wasn't just a miracle. And so
Yes.
I began to
Yeah.
circle back and go back and read the book of Daniel from a different perspective now, more
Mhm.
from my health,
Okay.
because all the times that I've
Right.
ever done the Daniel fast, I did it as collectively at a church, or doing it to start the new
Mhm.
year off right, or maybe for direction, but it was never about the
Sure.
health. And so as I circled back
Okay.
and started to read the book of Daniel, I realized that, wait a minute,
Mhm.
the reason why millions of Christians around the world do the Daniel fast is for one simple
Mhm.
reason, is that that scripture was illuminated, that
Mm.
Daniel was healthier than his peers, the ones that ate the king's diet.
Yes.
And so that
Yes.
allowed me to realize that there was a connection between eating foods, whole plant foods, or foods that nourish your body, and then also connecting your faith to that. That there was this
Yes.
synergy that was there that I never
Mhm.
saw before. And so I just went on this journey and on this quest to help other people connect their food to their faith.
And so that mind, body, and spirit, the
Right.
mind, body, and spiritual connection that
Yeah.
that is a part of that story.
Mhm.
And the pressure, right, that they had on, to deliver and to be around all of this lavish, these lavish situations and foods and spreads and the courage to stand up and be different, right?
That's it.
So
Mhm.
all of those things, are kind of part of the muscles that are expressed when you really look into that story. And so it sounds like
Mhm.
you had done it before. It was kind of like, okay, let me just get through this challenge. Maybe you may
Mhm.
not have done it all 100% on the food, but you went
Right.
into this time with like, I'm going to do it all right in terms of the
Right.
food, in terms of the prayer, in terms of the
Right.
fasting,
Right.
all of the things to make
Right.
sure like if it really works. Because I know like a lot of times we do things that we really don't want to do anyway, and then we
Mhm.
don't do it right and say, see, it didn't work. Like
Right.
I
Right.
knew it wasn't going to work, right? So trying to prove ourselves true, but you took it in a different direction.
Mhm.
And so those 30 days have now turned into how many years?
So it's over 12 years. It's about 12 years or more now.
Okay.
So, and what
Okay.
happened
Okay.
in that moment is that I just never turned back. And
Okay.
so when Gigi and I wrote the book, Daniel Fast, Why You Should Only Do It Once, that's where it was birthed
Mm,
out,
that's
because
good.
I only had to do it
Mhm.
once and I never
Right.
turned back. And so I thought to
Mhm.
myself that the Daniel Fast is such an amazing tool to help people kickstart a healthy long-term lifestyle, because what you're doing is you're removing all the toxic foods from your body, and then at the same time
Right.
you are adding in all these nutrient foods, and so you get to allow to see, what does my body feel like when I don't have junk food in it, when I don't have processed food, when I don't have
Okay.
sugars. And it gives you this understanding of how you feel and how good it feels, and so you go into your health journey now with a new baseline. um
Right.
and so that is why it's such a powerful tool. Yeah.
And that's why the book, like only doing it once, it's the
Hmm.
intention of, not just doing it temporarily,
Right.
and just really committing to the lifestyle, and everything that is a part of it.
Right.
And so it seems like you also, in order for it to be successful, you've got to look at it more than what you're having to give up. So, but
Right.
what's the hardest thing for you to give up when you first started?
I think when I first, for me, I always had to be honest, I think it was cheese because I always felt like
Yeah.
cheese was the holy grail of food of some sorts, you know? And I think cheese was the hardest thing up here. But what was good about it for me in my in how I did it is because when I went through the 4 weeks with the Daniel fast and I took out all the foods, I lost the craving for those things because I gave myself the
Okay.
window of eliminating it completely. I think a lot of times
Okay.
when we're trying to kickstart our health in moderation, it's
Hmm.
a lot more difficult than when we go all in.
Right.
And I didn't know that until I went all in. Like I thought it's better to do it kind of
Okay.
piece by piece, add a little this, add a little that, and then I'll gradually get there. But what happens is
Mhm.
that little bit of this, a little bit of that kind of pulls you back in or keeps you in that limiting belief that I can't give it up. But when you give it up and you
Okay.
live for a period of time without it and you see how your body feels so good, then it's such a different dynamic when you're trying to do it little by little. So that's what I found for
Okay.
myself.
Yeah. It's like it's all or nothing, right? And I know, my husband sometimes says that moderation kills.
Right.
I'm like, that's horrible. You
Yeah.
gotta give people a chance to,
Yeah.
to gradually get to that place. But
Yeah.
I think it really is about the why,
That's it.
so like, why are you doing it? If you're doing it, oh, let me lose, 5 pounds. Once you lose the 5 pounds, then what? Right. So it's really about the intention and the long term. And I think what you also mentioned was when you first started to do it, the benefits in terms of how you felt
Right.
physically and mentally was something that you couldn't deny. So can you talk a
You
little bit
couldn't
more about
deny, but
that?
but you don't get that unless you go all in. And that's where I think a lot of
So
people
you have to
miss. They
get there.
miss the baseline.
Okay.
You miss the baseline. And
Okay.
I think this is why the Daniel fast is a great opportunity because
Okay.
for a lot of people, you are now combining scripture and prayer and you're going into it from
Hmm.
a holistic approach. So you're not doing something, say, oh,
Okay.
I'm just doing something for 15 days or something. You're going into it spiritually, you're going in it emotionally, and then
Okay.
you're also doing the food. And so what happens
Mhm.
is it's a different type of process because now what you normally would be going into the Daniel fast to say, okay, well, I'm just going to be doing this for my finances to grow or whatever it is. You're now
Mhm.
honing into the health piece and you're now
Okay.
allowing yourself to process, well, how do I feel when I'm not eating these foods? Well, you know what? I feel a little stressed. I
Okay.
feel like I need new coping
Okay.
skills there.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm
Mhm.
emotionally eating. And now you're allowing the
Mhm.
prayer, scripture, and all of those things to now fill in those gaps. So you're almost doing this processing at the same time of actually giving up the food. So when you're giving up one, you're healing on another. And so that's why the Daniel fast is
Okay.
really an awesome way to jumpstart because it's allowing you to utilize your faith to get over the challenges of what normally would get you stuck with your food challenges. Yeah.
So it sounds like there may be some journaling involved because it's like if you're looking at, things that are happening, you probably want to have a journal or some way to document it. So
Yeah.
is there journaling
There
involved in
is a
this as
journal.
well? Okay.
There is a journal involved that kind of asks you
Okay.
to kind of document how are you feeling today? How are you feeling physically? How are you
Mm.
feeling emotionally? How are you feeling spiritually? Um, you
Okay.
know, how is your relationship with food?
Mm.
How can you use your prayer points to now kind of address some of those pain points that you're having around food? And so it's kind of this holistic approach that allows you now to really dig deeper into the why, as you were mentioning, because a lot of times I feel like we miss an opportunity to use our faith to develop our why. Because many times when you think about why do you want to get healthy? Well,
Mhm.
um, maybe it's an event based. Maybe I want to get to my
Mhm.
reunion. Maybe I
Mhm.
want to get to a wedding. Maybe I want to
Right.
get into the skinny jeans. I don't know, whatever
Whatever.
it is,
Right.
And a lot of times those
Right.
aren't deep enough. And so we find ourselves in this
Right.
yo-yo cycle. But what if
Mm.
you started to connect your plate to your faith? What if what
Right.
you ate was determining um, whether or not you were edifying your temple, whether or not you were
Okay.
honoring your temple? What about if you
Okay.
connected your plate to, is this food going to bring glory to God or not? And so these deep conversations that you can deepen your why, or what about if getting healthy meant that I was going to be stronger, live longer to carry out the divine purpose that I have over my life? What about if we connected the
Right.
dots to those things? How deep would our why
Hmm.
be? How accountable
Right.
would we be? So
Right.
that is one of the things that we are trying to help people do, is connecting your faith to your purpose, connecting your faith to why you want to be healthy, so that it could be more sustainable long term, because it's not an event, it's a value system.
Mhm.
And so if
Right.
how you eat is attached to your value system, in the sense of, I believe that I should honor the body that God gave me, that's a value.
Okay.
That's not an event. And
Hmm.
when you attach
Okay.
your goals or what you're trying to achieve to a value, it's more sustainable.
Okay. And so you're deepening these different areas, right? As a person goes through this. And it does not, maybe doesn't sound like it's something that the average person would be able to do on their own. It sounds like there is a coaching piece that is sometimes needed, because it feels like as the people are looking to take certain things off their plate, add
Mhm,
certain things to their plate, there's almost like a psychological connection to
mhm.
the food,
Yeah.
to their emotions as to why they may be choosing to eat these certain things. It
Mhm,
sounds like there's a lot, for this to be successful, there's a lot that has to happen.
mhm.
And so, what is that coaching element that is necessary for people to achieve long-term success?
Well, for us, with our program, what we do is we have a program called 5 Day Healthy Christian Women Boot Camp. And what we do is
Okay.
we walk the women, and a few good men, we say, through this 5 days that gives them foundational pieces to the puzzle. So they're eating like
Okay.
Daniel, but they're also in a community where they're sharing with other women and men, and they're praying
Okay.
and all of that. But we take them through three
Hmm.
five fundamentals. First day, we deal with why having a God-centered self-image is important to your health. So we tackle
Okay.
issues like body image, self-esteem. How are
Hmm.
we viewing beauty? Why do we have this
Yeah.
standard versus that standard? And then how do
Right.
we look at things from God's point of view? So we lay that
Okay.
foundation. We also come to it
Hmm.
from a scientific point of view. So we get into
Okay.
what the Daniel fast is actually doing to your body. Because I think a lot of people do the
Okay.
Daniel fast and they're like, wow, I feel so great. But there's a science behind why you feel so great. So
Hmm.
we go through the science as
Okay.
to what's actually happening to your body. And so they get that day one
Right.
education. And then day two, we deal with the whole concept of breaking our addiction to food. And so we
Okay.
get into the
Hmm.
emotional eating, and
Hmm.
is food in a rightful place in your life, or have you put it above where it
Hmm.
should be? And so we process all of that, and then we also talk about it from an industry perspective and the science, like the sugar, fat, and salt,
Okay.
and the things that are actually designed to get
Right.
you. And so they get to see how they're being played from one side, but then they also get to see
Right.
how they're dealing with their emotional eating and things like that. And then
Okay.
day three,
Okay.
we deal with breaking generational patterns of poor health. So we deal with
Okay.
the idea that people say, well, this runs in my family and I'm destined to have this. And so we talk about the idea how they can be a chain breaker by changing habits in their own life. And then we also come to it
Okay.
around with the science, and we talk about epigenetics and just how it works
Mm.
scientifically. And then on day
Okay.
four, we talk about the courage to take action. And so this is where we really just, you know, have them make a value decision. Are you going to act on your value?
Okay.
And then we talk about that. And then on the last day,
Okay.
we talk about how your health is connected to your wealth. And so we talk about the financial
Mhm.
implications of being in a
Yes.
system that's designed to keep sick and
Yeah.
how that affects your finances. And so people
Mm.
leave that 5 days. Mind you, they're doing the eating like Daniel for the 5 days, but they leave with an
Okay.
understanding scientifically, but they also leave because we also use the word of God and break down how all of these days work, but they also leave with a
Mhm.
sense of, wait a minute, I believe in these values and I want to do this because I'm convicted, but I'm also challenged and I also have an understanding as to what's happening. So with all those components combined, people
Mhm.
say, I want to keep going because they have the education along with the support.
Okay, so they get through and they have the what, like they kind of what it is,
Right.
and they have the why.
Hmm.
So where do they get the how? Because that part really kind of sometimes becomes very challenging where you're like, okay, Daniel fast, like what does that mean? What do
Yeah.
I
So
eat?
the
What
how
can I
is
eat?
we have a
How do I
program
eat? Yeah.
that we offer them later that if they want to continue and
Okay.
go on and get the support to transition to a whole food plant-based diet, we give them coaching
Okay.
calls, give them the transition piece, and so they can do it from that perspective. Or you have some
Okay.
people that are maybe they want to do their church and they just want to get the book Daniel Fast,
Mhm.
Why You Should Only Do It Once. There's a journal, there's
Okay.
recipes, there's also the
Okay.
science, but there's also the scripture. So some people might get that book
Okay.
and say, well, I'm going to do this
Mhm.
collectively at my church, or I'm going to do this at a fellowship. And then so they create that own support group for themselves using the book as a guide. And so there's, yeah, so that
Right.
those are two ways to do it.
And data has shown that people are more successful when they do take a community approach,
Hmm.
when they're able to have someone to hold them accountable and people that they can hold accountable, as well as for someone that you can share, like, hey, I
Yeah.
didn't do so great today,
Yeah.
and to get that encouragement.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the elements in terms of the food piece that's associated with Daniel Fast? And I know we said plant-based living, but are you able to kind
Mhm.
of really just kind of list out some things that you would be
Be
looking
able
to
to
eat
eat.
while you're doing? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there's a whole lot of variety that you can eat. You can eat a
Okay.
variety of legumes, beans, nuts,
Okay.
seeds, grains, fruits,
Mm-hmm.
vegetables, pretty much any of those, tofu, tempeh, um,
Okay.
yeah, those would be the two. And yeah, so you could eat pretty much anything from that whole list of foods. What you're eliminating
Okay.
really is dairy, animal products, um,
Okay.
like processed foods, of course.
Mm-hmm.
We eliminate the oil because a lot of people that come into
Okay.
the program, they're trying to lose weight, so we eliminate the oil for
Okay.
that reason. um,
Hmm.
but yeah, there's a lot of variety because like I said, you've got all the beans, all the nuts, all the seeds, all the whole grain,
Okay.
all the vegetables,
Hmm.
and all the fruits. Yeah,
So you don't have to starve yourself. You just have to
you don't have to
replace
starve yourself.
what.
You just have
Okay,
to
just
replace.
replace your stuff with.
Exactly.
Okay,
You just have to
with
replace,
the.
right? So there's no, right.
Okay. Okay, and so in terms of the success of the program, do you have any stories that you can share as it relates to some of the
Yeah.
success? Okay.
Yeah, we've had, I'll just give you one example. A lady that came in and she lost about 90 pounds. She
Wow.
lowered her A1C. We had other women who's lost, 30 to 40 pounds, who's again lowered their
Okay.
A1C or lowered their high blood pressure. We had
Okay.
one woman, she was a nurse, and she said, I could
Fantastic.
barely walk to my car. And she says, now I have so much energy, I could run to my car. Lost weight,
Okay.
lowered her blood pressure, got off her medication. So there's so
Mhm.
many stories that we have, and here's another one. Here's a real kicker for the Healthy for My Purpose. The one lady that lost the 90 pounds, she was able now, because before, when she had the all of the other things that was going on, she felt like she had to put certain things down in her life in terms of her calling and her purpose. She was able to run
Right.
for judge, for some local judge that she
Oh,
was
wow.
doing things that she
Mhm.
felt like she would have never done had she not started to get healthy
Right.
for her purpose. And so that's
Okay.
really, we like to say that we're really not in the health business, we're really in the purpose
Right.
business, because we believe that
Okay.
if you can get yourself healthy, what you're really doing is making an investment so that you can live out your calling and show up on the planet your best self,
Yes.
give whatever
Right.
it is that you're supposed to give.
So what do you think are some of the deterrents for people like, to do exactly what this program is to bring that? Do you think that people maybe that self-esteem piece is there where they don't necessarily believe that they're worth it?
Yeah, I think that's a factor. And to tell you the truth, I think a lot of times for a lot of the women that we speak to and men, is they never really connected their faith to their health. For some reason,
Okay.
it's compartmentalized. Like we use our health to pick who we're going to marry or what job we're going to take, but they never really made the connection that what I'm eating can also be a spiritual practice. That what I'm eating can
So they
also,
don't have to do it alone too, right? So now they don't have
and you
to
don't have to do it.
use, right. Okay.
Yeah, they don't have to do it
That's
alone,
great.
and they've connected that dot, but a lot of times
Mhm.
it's addressing those limited beliefs like you talk about, like, "I'm not worth it," or, "I can't live without this particular food," or, "I'm destined to have this particular chronic health issue because my mom had it." And so it's really what
Right.
happens when we start working with them and they go through the 5 days and eventually to our course is that it begins to now break down those limiting beliefs because they
Okay.
now you're replacing it with something with hope, and with a new way of doing things.
Yes, yeah, I mean, that's so important. And then the support system, right? So, a lot of times if, for instance, maybe women are doing this, but they're still having to cook for the other people in their household who aren't. How do
Mhm.
you address those types of situations?
Yeah, a lot of times we tell them, a lot of times it's understanding that you may be the change that will trickle out to your family, that will break generational patterns of
Okay.
poor health. So a lot of it's going to
Mhm.
be not trying to strong arm or not trying to come in and blow up the whole
Mhm.
house, I like to say, but be the change you want them to see, because when you become the change, people become curious, people become open,
Right,
people become
right.
understanding, and that is the real way to change family patterns. And so
Mhm.
we just tell them, you be your best self, and they will see the results. And when they see it,
Right.
that will open them up to the possibilities for themselves. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so are you starting, because I know this is the month, do you have a group that you're currently doing?
Yeah, we just finished the first boot camp, just ended. We are
Okay,
now enrolling people right now into our course, but we are actually enrolling people all year round. So people
okay,
can get in there. But our next boot camp is actually April 15th to the 19th. And that's when we're going to have our
okay,
next. Mhm.
okay. And so how what did you see kind of happening during the COVID times? The 2019, 20, I mean, I'm sorry, 2020 time period. Did you see
Mhm.
people maybe turning more toward food, more toward,
Oh, yeah.
ways okay.
Yeah, I definitely. We actually came together and started Healthy for My Purpose in the middle of the pandemic. But a lot
Okay.
of people that we spoke to, food became this obsession during the pandemic. People were using food and alcohol and different things to kind of cope with what was going on. So I think there was a
Self-coping,
definite
right.
self-coping. I think there was definitely an increase, definitely during the pandemic. Yeah.
Okay. And so you're seeing people now kind of trying to climb out of it.
People
People
are
are
we're
starting to
trying to
be
climb out. Yeah, people I
active
think people
and
are now saying, "Okay, I need to make a switch." You know what I mean? Like, because
okay,
we were
okay.
in 2020, 21, 22, but now that we're in 2023, I think people are like, "Okay, COVID's over. I've gotta, redeem some of the times, from the COVID
Yes.
year." So I think a lot of people
Right.
are really thinking about their health more, and I think it scared a lot of people because
Yeah.
I just remember, when the statistics came out that those with chronic health issues had a higher risk of dying or having complications with COVID. And I think it shook
Right.
us up a little bit because we realized that being healthy was a thing. Like if you never
Right.
thought it was
It had
something,
benefit.
it,
Yeah.
it made us a heightened awareness for it. And so I think a lot of people were ready to make changes because of that scare as well, because this caught us off guard.
Okay.
And I think a lot of times we think,
Yeah.
oh, I got 5 years, I got 10 years, the heart attack is 20 years out. But when a pandemic
Right.
hit, it we had to scramble. It was like ready or not, the pandemic hit. So it allowed people to realize that now is the time. It always will be the time. And
Yes.
delaying our health or putting it off to tomorrow, we learned through COVID-19 may not be
Right.
always a sure thing. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I know we haven't spoken directly about exercise.
mhm.
What is the component of exercise in this Daniel fast? Or is there a component of
Well, what we
exercise?
do in the beginning, when we do the beginning, we don't really emphasize the exercise.
Okay.
It
It's
really
enough
just
to try to
focuses on
focus on
changing
the
the food.
food.
Right,
Right.
just focus on the food, because a lot of times, and I think people overestimate exercise. Like, it is definitely beneficial, it's definitely good,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
the majority of your benefit is gonna change when you change what's at the end of your fork. And then
Right.
exercise
And then like
complements
80%,
that.
right? Okay.
80%, yeah,
Right.
and exercise now complements that, as opposed to a lot of times we think we could exercise a bad diet. I know I've been there where I thought I could run this thing off,
Let
you
me
know what I
just eat
mean? Let me just eat this, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna exercise," and then when I realized the ratio of the calories and what I ate, I just remember being
this.
like,
Mhm.
"Oh, like, this is just not, you can't outrun a bad diet, you can't out-exercise a bad
Right.
diet, and you lose weight in the
Right.
kitchen." And so
Right.
that's
It's
kind of like we
true.
want them
It's
to get
true.
that understanding that your food i- is going to be your number one change, and then everything else you're going to add in as a supplement and as a complement. Yeah.
Right. And the other thing is not to starve yourself, you know. And so that, like we want to just step away and let's like, not eat. But what the Daniel fast is teaching is it's not about not eating, it's about eating the right things,
Yeah.
and making sure that you're getting your nutrients from your food.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't be starving,
You shouldn't be starving.
right?
Some people, when we do the Daniel fast in the boot camp, they're like, "Oh, I feel hungry." We just say, "Eat." The issue is just eat
Right.
the right thing. And so I think we're in a diet culture that we've been conditioned that if
Yes.
something's going to
Yeah.
work, it means that I'm eating less. But what the
Great.
Daniel fast does is that,
Mhm.
it flips the script, because it really isn't about eating less, it's about eating better. So it's about
Okay.
teaching you how to choose the right foods, not about
Mhm.
depriving yourself of the wrong foods, right? And so it's really
Okay.
a mindset shift where you're not trying to
Mhm.
deprive, but you're going in to nourish yourself. And when you're full, you just
Okay.
stop. And so it's learning those
Right.
cues, and not, and what happens is, too, it helps you, because let's face it, no one, you're not going to emotionally eat with broccoli. We're just not going to do it. And so natural foods are just designed to
Mhm.
balance us, where we don't overeat
Right.
it, we don't use it, and abuse it. And so it's already intrinsically designed like that. But of course, if you're picking up the processed food and the chips, and we all know that, these things is like a bottomless pit. So
Yeah, it's the intimidating part is the second part of the Daniel. It's the fast part, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so a lot of us have been, like taught growing up that like fasting means, oh, you don't eat, you don't eat. Like
yeah, yeah.
fasting
And
kind of,
that is
typically
another kind
means
of
not
fast for
eating.
sure. Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
But in
So
the Daniel fast thing, it's
mhm,
more of you're not eating a certain type of thing. So it's
certain
not a
things,
complete water
right?
fast and things like that. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's
And
always
that has its
comforting,
place. That's something
So
totally different.
yeah.
But this, yeah, but this is something different. Yeah.
Well, this is fantastic. So I know that you kind of like look at the Daniel diet and then the King's diet, right? So
Mhm.
what does the King's diet represent today?
Well, the King's diet represents, we like to say that the King's diet is the standard American diet today, right?
Okay.
So we always
Okay.
say, hey, be a Daniel and refuse the King's diet. Because when
Okay.
you look at it, we're in a place in society where the number one cause of death is heart disease, is Healthy Heart Nation
Yes.
trying to reverse that. But
Absolutely.
so part of it, I believe it's because more of us need to refuse the King's Diet. And it takes that
Okay.
boldness like Daniel, it takes that
Mhm, mhm,
conviction. But again, like
mhm.
Daniel, it takes that deep why, because a lot of times we're unable
Yes.
to refuse the King's Diet in our own life because
Mhm,
we don't have the why. And so that
mhm.
is why we are trying to really help people use their faith as a tool so that they can
Right.
lean on that deeper why like Daniel, so they'll be strong enough to refuse the King's Diet, which is the standard of
And
our
they
faith.
don't have to do it alone.
And they
They
don't have to
don't
do it
have to
alone.
do it
I mean,
alone.
Daniel had 3
Right.
friends, and you may have a tribe with another whole bunch of women, so even
Ex-
Daniel didn't do it alone,
Exactly.
so
Exactly. And
Yeah.
God is there too, to,
Yes,
call on him. He'll help you,
of
give you
course.
what you need in that moment, even if it's,
Exactly.
point of clarity, or whether it's, a better decision making,
Yep.
to reach for this versus
Yep.
that.
Yep. Yep.
But, like you said, it does take the awareness around, realizing that the society is not set up for you to be successful in this way,
That's
right?
right.
You've got the
That's right.
advertisements, you got the Super Bowl coming up very soon.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So, like,
Yep.
what
There's
does
so
your
many
what
things.
is your typical
Yeah. Go ahead.
typical Super Bowl spread look like?
Okay, so, let's see. Okay, so one of the things, we have it on Daniel's plate too, is that we do these
Okay.
stuffed, jalapeno peppers, poppers, which is really
Mm,
nice.
okay.
The other one
Okay.
that I might do is, roasted chickpeas. The
Okay.
other one, of course,
And
everybody
they're
knows
crunchy. They're crunchy
they're
and nice and
crunchy,
salty and
and you could
crunchy.
add, like, different,
Right.
seasonings on it to kind of,
Yes.
give you a different flair for that. Um,
Okay.
there's also, of course, everybody knows the cauliflower. That one is always nice. The cauliflower wings. What
Wings.
else? Um, what else would be for football?
No,
I mean,
that was good. Like, I can see it.
oh yeah,
It's like,
yeah, and nachos. We have nachos. We have nachos
okay.
on there as well.
Okay.
So that's good too.
Okay. And do you do like the plant-based cheeses, or do you
Yep,
make your
we
own?
we
Or
make our own.
okay.
So everything on
Oh, nice.
danielsplate.com is Daniel compliant.
Okay.
So we don't have anything
Okay.
processed or anything like that. So we literally
Nice.
make the cheese from whole plant foods. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, and so as it relates to, people who want to follow this and want to do that, where do you direct them to get in touch with you, as well as to work with you and your partner in this?
Yeah. So you could reach us at healthyformypurpose.com. We have the
Okay.
boot camp on there. We have the book on there. We
Okay.
also have a podcast called Healthy for My Purpose. So you can engage with us there as well. We're also on
Okay.
Instagram, Healthy for My Purpose as well. You can DM us on the Instagram as well, and we'll reach out to you there as well.
Fantastic, fantastic. So before we get out of here, I definitely want to talk about the Healthy Heart Nation and the Plantrition Project conference that we have scheduled in March 24th through 26th. It is taking place in Huntsville, Alabama, and it is called the Health Equity and Lifestyle Project. Now, Cersei will be there at the conference,
Hmm.
as a participant, and she'll be there to interact. But Cersei, when you found out about the conference, why do you feel that something like this is important, and why did you decide to take your time to do
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, I thought this is so important because it's information that I think our community needs because it makes a difference. The health equity policies and things that are put into place, it's going to give um, it's going to give information and education that can save lives, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
so
right.
you're talking about, I know you talk about the blood pressure, but a lot of times people
Mhm.
just don't know. And so putting
Right.
things in space where you can level the playing field, number one, but also educating and empowering the community to understand the role of lifestyle in their
Mhm.
life, but also from another perspective in putting things in place to leveling out the playing field so people are not targeted or or things like that. And so it's
Right.
definitely needed. And the people that are coming, I mean, are awesome. So yeah, it's definitely the conference to come to.
Yes, and the next slide will kind of give some list of some of the names of the people
Mhm.
who will be there. So we encourage each of you all, if you could go to our the website, the helpconference.com, and it will give you information on the conference. Tickets are still available. The host hotel is also available. It is going to be taking place in Huntsville, Alabama, March
Mhm.
24 through 26th. So,
Yeah.
Cersei, thank you so much for your time this evening. We are so
Thank you so much
grateful
for
that you
having
have
me.
you're very welcome, and the information that you shared has been so enlightening. So, you always inspire me every time that I talk to you. I gradually get a little bit closer.
Uh-huh.
I am not fully delivered yet, but I am working on it. I'm working on it.
We're gonna
So,
send you a ticket to
but
the boot camp. You're gonna be in the next boot camp, Danette. I'm sending you a ticket.
okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm gonna need that
Yeah.
coaching, to help me
Yes.
get through it.
Mhm.
But I am so grateful for the work that you all are doing,
Yeah.
and the lives that you've been able to change. And like you said, when you're able to touch someone else's lives, then they're able to touch
Mhm.
other lives. And
Right.
and the it just reverberates into all kinds of things, and it can change the nation, right? So it is
Yes.
really about just pouring into people where they are and where you are. And so we're
Mhm.
just grateful that you
Yeah.
used your gifts and talents to do that.
Yeah. Thank you
Well,
so
thank you
much.
also for being an ambassador with Healthy Heart Nation. And so, with that, what we'll do is go ahead and close this out. So, Heart to Heart is, we do a program every third Friday of every month. And so, please look forward to our next, session in February. It is Black History Month. And so we are pulling together programming that will cover, historical and looking at the history, the past and the
Mhm.
future in the areas of health, education, business, and justice, and how we can
Mhm.
continue to move the conversation forward and the culture forward. So thank you all for joining us tonight, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day or night.